So could you tell us maybe a little bit about yourself and your background? How did you get into design?
After I graduated from high school, I went to study gold and silversmithing, and I did that course for 2 years, which was incredible, and I learnt a lot. I just rode around to a bunch of different makers and studios within Melbourne and kind of offered myself up for an internship, and ended up getting an interview with Christopher Boots, who's a lighting designer, and ended up getting a job there as a studio artisan when I was about 21. And that job involved electrical wiring, surfacing of brass and aluminium and copper, so a lot of kind of assembly. So the way that Christopher Boots operated was a made-to-order model. So the studio artisans would take the order from start to finish through to packing. So you really got to see the kind of whole process of the making of these beautiful lights that he would create. And that business grew very quickly, and with that I sort of got more and more opportunity within the business. So I kind of moved into a production development role where I was QCing other people's work and kind of identifying issues with either the product or the production process, and offering up solutions or writing like assembly guides and documentation, things like that. So I was very interested in sort of the how and why rather than the aesthetic side of things. I knew that I didn't want to only be making for my career. I wanted to kind of have the ability to do the CAD modeling side of things and have a little bit more understanding of what goes into those processes. So I decided to start studying at RMIT. And then I went over and studied at TU Delft in the Netherlands, which has an incredible program there and an amazing facilities for making. It was at the start of 2020 that I came back, and I completed my third year in 2020. And then I started my own studio in early 2020, which I was planning on doing alongside study, but that kind of grew very rapidly, a lot quicker than I was expecting. And so at the end of 2020, I finished working at Christopher Boots and started this full time.
Yeah, no, that was amazing. That was a very thorough answer, so thank you. And I think it's pretty interesting how you kind of went from the initial doing the jewelry and silversmithing to then working and then back into the degree, despite already having been there. But yeah,
this kind of follows on kind of perfectly. We wanted to then ask you personally in your work now that you're in your own studio, what is your kind of process for designing a new piece, and how does that maybe differ to how it was at Christopher Boots?
I guess my role at Christopher Boots was kind of a more reactionary design methodology. There were some products that I took from kind of concept through to production, but I was more kind of product development of existing products. So a lot of problem solving, a lot of asking, why do we do it this way? And is there a better way of doing it? Or looking up new lighting technologies and trying to kind of bring an old design into a current kind of technological landscape. Ongoing within my own business, if I look at the way I made things when I first started 3 years ago to now, I'm still always developing those products, but I'm a kind of process-led designer more than a kind of concept-led designer. I will find a material or a shape or a production technique that I want to work with, and then I'll kind of let that inform what the design ends up looking like. So, for example, a product that I'm working on at the moment, I wanted to work with glass blowers. So I went to the glass blowers and I kind of just chatted with them about what their capabilities were, what their colors were, what molds they had already to kind of keep costs down for me in the start. I sort of start with research into techniques or materials, and then the designs usually come out of that. I'll find that I'll just have a kind of penny drop moment where I'll feel inspired, or I'll see a shape, or I'll see a design come into my mind through that kind of conversation that I have with the suppliers, or through the work that I'm doing in the studio. Like I'll cut a piece of material or bend a piece of material in a certain way and then it'll all kind of unfold from there. So it's more process led than it is, sketching a beautiful design on a piece of paper and then trying to figure out how to make it.
What are your thoughts on and how do you implement kind of the idea of sustainability within your design?
Yeah, so I run my business on a model. So I don't make any products until there is a demand for it, which I think is incredibly important. I'm trying to sort of slow down that business model so that people are making considered choices. So from a material resource point of view, there's no resources that are used until there's someone who wants to use them or wants to own them. That model also works from a financial sustainability point of view. I don't have to outlay tens of thousands of dollars to get a big collection of stock so that I can have people not have to wait 6 weeks for an order. The made to order model is incredibly important to me, and I don't think I ever will change the way that I operate in that sense. Predominantly, well, I'd say 99% of my suppliers are within Australia. So sustainability within my industry as well, I'm leaning on the manufacturing industry within Australia, and support that they give to me and the support I give to them is helping us survive, I suppose. My steel and aluminium furniture, to recycle steel and aluminium is incredibly straightforward and commonly done. But having said that, one of my steel coffee tables, for example, that's not going to break. It's not going to, maybe it could get knocked and get some damage on it, but you can sandblast that and repowder coat it and make it look as good as new. It's not going to swell or split or break in a way that's irreparable. So those design considerations are intentional. So there's no waste in the sense of, if something gets damaged, then it's no good anymore. My assembly choices are based on the I guess, design for disassembly and design for repair and reuse models.
Yeah, I just had a bit of questions steering away a little bit, focusing on your challenges. So what challenges do you find in design? For example, have you compared your own work to others throughout studying and in your professional career? If so, how did you overcome these?
You realize that all of a sudden people are going to be looking at your work, and you start kind of going into that anxious analytical of what are they going to think, and it's hard to separate your own pride in the work from the worst case scenario of what people might think of your work. I think more often than not that's proven wrong when you do put yourself out there. The design community is incredibly supportive, and I've never had an experience where my anxious thoughts have been proven right.
In your practice as well, what are your most memorable projects? You did mention the steel coffee table, and it's robust and it's repairable. What are your most memorable projects, and why do you think that?
I am very proud of the first lamp I ever made, which was a lamp with a jeweler called Seb Brown. He had a sculpture that he had made, which was a kind of T shape with two round balls on the end, and he invited me to interpret that into a lamp. And that was my first kind of challenge in functionality within a product. I had a lot of experience in lighting design, and I wanted to kind of focus on the elements that I'd learned and the things that I felt were missing from the products that I was working on at Christopher Boots. So that has two shades that can pivot, and you can bounce the light off the wall, or you can point it down and have it as a task light. And I have those, I have a couple of those lamps throughout my studio and in my house. And every time I interact with it, I have that same sense of like, oh, this feels good. It feels right. Even, I made that in 2018. So 5 years on, I'm still loving that product, and I still wouldn't really change much about it. So I'm really proud of that. And then there's a collection that I'm just about to launch called the Oro lamp, which I'm really also quite proud of. Yeah, there's a few things that are coming up that I think maybe they're standing out because they're new and they're exciting. But in terms of my previous designs, I think the table lamp #1 with Seb really stands out for me. Anytime I've done a project that has gone into kind of a commercial setting, I don't know, I get some sort of satisfaction out of that. I just did a series of floating shelves that went into this store that's opening in Westgarth, and there's about 15 of them on the wall, and it just looks like a painting, and I'm really, really happy with that, how that's worked out. Yeah,
great. And with that kind of work, who are some of your favorite designers? Who do you look to for inspiration? Do you look to past mentors as well?
That's a good question. I have mentors that are not necessarily, design aesthetic mentors. They're more kind of business mentors, in the sense of they run their own businesses within Melbourne, and one of them has nothing to do with design at all. The other one is a furniture maker himself, and they've been doing it for as long as since I was born. So they've got a lot more experience than I do, and I think that those conversations with them really help me feel grounded and help me sort of navigate the scary parts of running your own business. As for designers that I look up to, it may sound like a lie, but I don't really engage with much, I guess, design media on a day-to-day. I find that it kind of clouds my thoughts a little bit, because I am kind of more of a process-driven person. I more look at, engineering videos or making videos. I think that there is a strong sort of mid-century influence in my work, as well as kind of some brutalist elements as well. I'm very inspired by Japanese design, particularly Japanese architecture. Yeah, I guess that's sort of where I would look to if I was to talk about my influences.
So I was just wondering, do you have any tips or pieces of advice for actually entering the professional design world in Melbourne?
Yes. I don't have advice on how to get a graduate role as an industrial designer, because I've never done it. I think if you do want to start your own business as a furniture designer or maker, if you want to be a good designer, I think that you should try and get as much work as you can making before you go ahead and forge your path as a designer or a business owner. I think that the wealth of experience that I got from working at Christopher Boots and doing my own projects outside of that, I grew up in the country, so my dad, would always be welding different things or building different things. I had a partner who was an artist as well, so I would go to his studio and work on his machines when I hadn't got my own setup yet. All of that experience in how things go together informed my design process a lot more than any class at RMIT. So as I'm designing something, I'm thinking about how it's going to be made, rather than designing something and then having to figure out how the hell I'm going to make it. So I'm sort of thinking in a manufacturing process as I'm designing work, and that only comes from the fact that I have enough experience, or every time I make something, I gain more experience in that thought process. And I think that the best designers out there are people who have started or continue to learn and hone their own making skills. Whether that means that you end up making the work yourself or not, I'm getting to the point now where I will probably stop welding everything myself. I think that it's really important for a designer to be able to walk into a manufacturer or walk into to their staff who are making their things and understand what they're talking about and understand what they're asking for, and how, if everyone was to leave, then they could probably get it done themselves to a certain degree. I don't think you have to be an expert in every single part, but if you are walking into a new supplier or a new manufacturer, you don't have to have all the answers, and you don't have to pretend like you've got all the answers, because people can see through that pretty quickly. But you want to be researched, and you want to be, have an understanding of what you're asking for, whether it's what you're asking for from someone else or what you're asking for from your own design, and what those limitations are.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that.
I think that was everything. I just want to say a huge thank you. I think that was a lot more thorough and in-depth and genuine than I think any of us expected. So really appreciate it.
That's all right. And look, if you guys have ever got any questions or want to come see the workshop or anything, just holler. I am not private about any of these things. So come on down.